Okay, guys, here I am recording another presentation for you. And basically, what you're going to see is the very first part of chapter 3, which is India. We're only going to look at at sections 1 and 2. Sections 3 and 4 cover China. So we're only going to be looking at section 1 and 2 in this presentation so that you can just pay attention to India, which you guys can see on that map to the left in green. So on this slide we have the reading, which is the summary of section 1, early civilization in India. As early as 3000 BC, an advanced civilization known as the Indus or Harappan civilization emerged in northern India. So remember that map. It was based around two highly organized cities that provided inhabitants with sewage system, always good, and other public works. The Harappan kings claimed to rule with divine assistance. Harappan civilization was toppled when the Aryans, you may have heard of those people in World War II. These are not the same Aryans as what Hitler thought. Indo-European nomads invaded in 1500 BC. Two enduring features of Indian civilization, Hinduism and the caste system, originated with the Aryans. The Sanskrit written language, please look below, was developed by the Aryans in the 6th century BC, and a doctrine called Buddhism developed as a rival to Hinduism. You guys can see the differences if you look up a Buddhist image of Buddha from India is very different than the Chinese Buddha. The founder, Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, rejected the Hindu belief in multiple deities as well as the rigid caste system. Instead, he preached his Four Noble Truths, emphasizing the need to search for wisdom as a way to end suffering and achieve nirvana. You can see the beautiful Sanskrit writing there and what each of those symbols means. And the caste system, well, I think we have it in high schools. You probably, again, people are probably placed in caste systems in high school. As you look at the next slide, early civilization, the land of India. Of course, if you look at this picture, please concentrate on the map as I discussed. It is surrounded by water on most sides. Obviously, if it was surrounded by all sides, it would be an island. It has the Ganges and the Indus rivers. And so if you look very carefully, you can see the Ganges and the Indus rivers there with the Deccan Plateau, which extends to the tip of India. Now, monsoons, which we do have in Las Vegas, affect the climate by bringing heavy rains, which in that particular climate, actually farmers depend on. We do not in Las Vegas. In fact, they're very dangerous for Las Vegas. The first Indian civilization. Now, that is where we begin on page 72 in your book. Where it says, as in Mesopotamia and Egypt, early civilization in India and China emerged through river valleys. This has been a theme that we have been looking at through every single civilization that we have covered so far, and it's not one that's going to escape us as we continue to look at other civilizations. Water plays an important part. So you can see two of the most well-known were the Harappa and the Mohenjo-daro. Now, let's face it, guys. I am no person that's going to pronounce all these words correctly, which is fine. I don't expect you to either, but just butcher these slowly as we do go through these presentations. You guys can just kind of laugh at me. Now, what I tried to do with this slide was to show you the differences between these two groups and the similarities. So if you look at the Harappa, you see there were 35,000. If you look at the other group, there were 40,000 people. And again, the map to the right kind of shows you the area when we're talking about north and south. The Harappa had rulers, were divine, gods and goddesses, and a farming community. Both of them had broad streets running north and south to east to west, walled communities, and of course, mud brick buildings. So if you guys look at the map at the very top where it says India's first civilization, you can kind of see where those two civilizations were. And I'm sure you have heard of the Himalaya mountain range. In today's times, that's where Tibet is. And many people go to climb those mountains because, let's face it, they're where the tallest mountains in the world are located. So that's a challenge for people. If you look below the circles, it says the arrival of the Aryans. They were a nomadic people north of the Indus River, and they excelled at war. They were basically a pastoral people, which means that they would herd animals along and then invade and herd animals. The invention of iron made plows, which of course is very important because then you can farm better, and covering more land when you can farm better. They farmed wheat, barley, millet, rice, and Sanskrit, which we already spoke about. And you can see the time period BC, which we were talking about, 1500 to 400 BC. India was a group of warring kingdoms. Rajas, Aryan leaders, led small states. Okay, so as you guys are looking through, we are down at the page 74 when we're discussing this area of Indian history to follow along in your book. Okay, you guys, on this particular slide, there's so much information to get to you, and I really want you to have it. So, society in ancient Egypt. Basically, if you guys are looking on there, that is found on page 75. Aryan clashes of conquered and conqueror, the caste system begins. It's very important that you understand the 5 levels down below. A caste system is based upon what you do and your skin color. It's terrible. Priests were the Brahmins, the warriors, and again, here I can screw up Indian words, Kshatriyas, commoners, Vaisyas, peasants, Sudras, and of course that's where most people, most all of us would be. They are dark-skinned, and it's the largest group, and unfortunately the untouchables. And the untouchables were people that were born with birth defects, typically. Some of you might watch Ashley and Brittany, the conjoined twins. They unfortunately would be placed there, and they're obviously wonderful girls, so that is a terrible system. Then let's compare these two religions, Hinduism and Buddhism, so you can see the years, and then you can see that Hinduism was brought in by the Aryan people. They believed a single force in the universe, Brahman. That individual, Atman, was to seek the ultimate power. Now, you guys, I can't get to everything, so please read page 77 in your book for this religion, and then page 78 for Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama, he was very, very wealthy, son of a ruler, married at 16, late 20s, began to look for a cure for human suffering. He followed the esoteric self-denial, then meditated and found enlightenment. So you guys can see these two opposite religions found in the same place. Buddhism actually spreads further to China, so you need to understand that because the Buddhist and the Indian Buddha look very different if you look at their statues. In Hinduism, there is karma. You probably use that term quite often. Good karma, bad karma. Karma will get you. What you do now determines your future. And then, of course, Dharma. Again, you can look at this word. The concept of karma is ruled by Dharma, or the divine law. The law requires that all people do their duty. Yoga is senses are stilled. Again, it's not just an exercise at 24-hour fitness. It's a method of training designed to lead to a union. Yoga means union. Yogis lead yoga. They are polytheistic and believe that they are all just an expression of Brahman. Like all of those gods, Shiva, there's one with an elephant. Can't think of it off the top of my head, but they are all a piece of Brahman. And then in Buddhism, you're to achieve nirvana. Yes, the band took the name. The end of self and ultimate reality. All family lived under one roof in India, patriarchal. Marriage was arranged. Children take care of parents. And the cité, women had to throw themselves on a fire-burning husband. I know. Women did not have many rights at this point and in this particular society, so please remember that. Again, read this in your book because I cannot cover all of this in the time that this recording allows me to. So I was probably talking too much on the last slide and I exceeded my limit. So I hope you were looking at Buddhism on that last slide. But what we have here on this one is basically a summary of section 2. Despite their cultural influences in India, the Aryans never united the region politically. The Mauryan dynasty was the first to rule a centralized Indian empire. The Maroons came to power in 324 BC, a few years after the failed invasion by Alexander the Great, guy down to the right. However, periods of prosperity in India often ended in invasion. The Kushan kingdom is what is now Afghanistan, replaced the Mauryan dynasty as the major regional power. The Kushans prospered due to trade along the 4,000-mile Silk Road that passes through their territory. After Persian invaders toppled the Kushans, the Guptas established a new Indian dynasty in AD 320. Nomadic Huns, as in Attila the Hun, eventually put an end to the good fortunes of the Guptas, and the empire dissolved. Despite periods of disunity, early Indian civilization made lasting contributions in architecture, flourished, and the development of Sanskrit made it possible for Indians to record their great historical epics. Indians also advanced the study of astronomy and, bummer, mathematics. Their advances were later adopted in the Arab world and in Europe. Okay, guys, section 2. Apparently I have time limits on recording this stuff, so good for you, right? The Mauryan dynasty that was discussed in the summary, both Hinduism and Buddhism developed, you can look at the picture to the right, out of the Aryan culture in India. Persians, Greeks, and close to Greece is Macedonia. Alexander the Great was Macedonian. All threatened India. See, Alexander the Great invaded. The founding of the Mauryan dynasty was established by that guy. The capital was in the Ganges Valley. And the reign of an Shuko, the best Indian ruler, Buddhist, declined after he died. Now, a review. Remember what nomadic means. The Kushan kingdom and the Silk Road ended when Persians invaded that were nomadic, people that walk around. Established the Silk Road from China to Rome, covering 4,000 miles. Remember, the United States is only 3,000 miles across, so it's further than that. Only luxury goods, sorry about that space, were carried on the Silk Road because it was dangerous. If you look to the right, items that were traded on the Silk Road, you will need to know this besides it being luxury goods. Chinese had silk, tea, and porcelain. India had ivory, textiles, precious stones, and pepper. And Rome had wool, linen clothes, glass, and stones. So again, you can see that in the picture. The next slide for section 2, new empires in India. The kingdom of the Guptas. The Magadha Raja named Chandragupta, who was related to the Chandragupta of 6 centuries before, controlled rich hills. Around the year 308, he married a princess from the neighboring kingdom of Lishiva. And with his marriage, he gained a hold over the flow of northern India's commerce on the Ganges River. His son, Sumadragupta, took over and made northern India powerful with Faxian, a Buddhist Chinese man describing the empire as tolerant. And of course, tolerance is something that does tend to make these people a bit more powerful. Okay, that is definitely something to remember. We are on page 84 in your book. Faxian spent several years with the 5th century. Faxian, a Buddhist monk, admired the Gupta rulers, their tolerance of Buddhism, and the prosperity of the country. The world and Indian culture, that is page 85. Literature, a lasting legacy. Oldest known came from the Aryans, known as the Vedas. And the Mahabharata, 90,000 stanzas, and Ramayana were Indian epics. I bet they were at 90,000 stanzas. Architecture. Asoka spread Buddhist-inspired architecture. So you could see he was a leader, and then he kind of had things built in the Buddhist-inspired style. And science. Here we go. Knew the earth went around the sun. Obviously novel for some cultures that didn't believe that for years. During the Gupta Empire, the first to use algebra, bummer. And they also used the symbol 0. Now, this is the last slide for this particular presentation. And It is basically a review. So if you see above, we have Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens sapiens and the Neanderthals. So if you remember the concept of hunter-gatherers, Paleolithic meant that there were tool makers, old stone, and the nomads, which we just reviewed. The Neolithic Revolution led to the systematic agriculture. Remember, people planted food, and the domestication of animals. Copper Age, and then the Bronze Age, and the concept of civilization from chapter 1. Then if you look at these 4 cultures, Egypt, Israel, Mesopotamia, and Persia, you can see how there is water associated, whether it is the Nile River, the Mediterranean, the Tigris and Euphrates, or the Tigris and the Euphrates and the Mediterranean. Okay, several of them might have been polytheistic, believing in many gods, and some were just monotheistic, like Israel was, believing in one God. Of course, Egypt is known for pyramids and pharaohs, Israel, the 10 Commandments, and King Solomon. Mesopotamia for Hammurabi's Code, which you should have read in the last lesson, and Persia for King Darius and King Xerxes. Xerxes being in a character in one of my favorite movies, 300. So, it is always good to review what we have studied so far, chapters 1 and 2, where rivers, writings, and religions. And you can see me there down to the left, not to the right.